Well, I was playing guitar since I was a kid. I suppose I had a guitar first when I was 9 years old, and my parents were very understanding and very supportive. And then I was earning enough money while I was at school in local groups to buy myself a Gibson guitar and a Vox amplifier on the hire purchase. You know, my dad signed the credit sort of forms, you know, and I used to pay off so much a week. And then when I left school at 16, I got a job. I was very lucky. I answered an ad in the Melody Maker, and I got a job with a rock and roll singer called Marty Wilde, who you may know his daughter. His daughter's called Kim Wilde, and she's had a lot of success. Well, Marty was a very big star in the early 60s, he's a rock and roll singer, and I was his guitar player for 3 years, and it's like a baptism of fire. And then straight into the deep end, you know. Then I wrote to Eric Burden, who was forming his band, and with some songs, because I was a songwriter as well from when I first started. I was always writing songs and sending them to people. And anyway, I sent the songs off to Eric Burden, and the next thing I knew, I heard from a guy called Mike Pinder, and who was the keyboard player in the Moody's, saying whether I'd like to come up and meet a couple of the guys who were Ray and Graham. From the band, and I met them at a house in South London, and we got together, and we decided to just go out and do some gigs. And the band had already been going. It had started in Birmingham as the M&B 5, and then it became the Moody Blues. A couple of weeks after that, I met John. He came to the group, and that was how it started, really. Everybody came from very different sort of backgrounds. We had some work. The thing that brought us together was that we had a guy who was offering us some work in Belgium and Holland and in France.
Excellent. You were brought together by some very, very, very distant contacts.
Well, it was. I mean, the group had been together, and only John and I weren't there. But the other three guys knew each other and had been working together. Mike, Ray, and Graham. Mike has since left, and so yeah, it came to that, and we just went off abroad and perfected our art. You know.
There it was, the birth of the Moody Blues. In depth. Okay, so as you evolved as a band,
yeah.
How did the era, you know, the changing of the eras? I mean, you've been around for 20 years as a band.
Sure.
So you've seen a lot of stuff go.
Yeah.
How do you think that's changed you as a person?
Well, I think I don't know whether it's changed me. That's responsible for changing me as a person. I think a lot of things that I've learned in my life have been responsible for me evolving and transforming as a person. And I'm probably a lot less intense than I was when I very first started. When I first came to the group, I was 19 when I wrote Nights in White Satin, which was a thing that, you know, that was the one that took it away. And then I was a very intense kind of young man. I was in a race, you know, with my head down. I was running all the time, constantly moving forward. And I learned a few years ago to sort of kind of see myself as I really am, and that was a big change for me, I suppose, about 7 or 8 years ago. And I learned to relax, and I learned to look around and enjoy my life and take it day by day, and just to appreciate the music. The changes that have happened in the music business, you know, we've always gone our own way. We've said, listen, right at the beginning, we said, we're going to just write our own music and play our own music and just see what happens. If people like it, great. If they don't, then we'll just do it for ourselves, you know, and we just be playing up the pub somewhere in London, you know. Yeah, just doing it because we like it.
All right, well, you guys were like one of the #1 British invaders. You influenced a lot of bands around the world, in the United States and England. Who were you influenced by?
Well, I think at the beginning, for me, my first influence, I suppose, my first real influence, because growing up in the 50s, I was born in 1946, so I saw that sort of rock and roll stuff happen. I always thought it was a little bit old-fashioned. You know, I loved Elvis and Little Richard, but it always seemed to draw something from the 40s. And then Bobby Darin was the first person that turned me on, because his records were just different. You know, they were different. And then Buddy Holly, then the Everlys, then the Beatles just, you know, they were the #1, they were the leaders of the whole gang, and they were the best. Then I suppose since then, different. When we came here to California, we did a whole tour with Jeff Snare playing, and people like Canned Heat, and we started meeting a lot of American bands. Buffalo Springfield really turned me on. Then it went to people like Donald Fagen, you know, who's still my big hero, really.
Excellent. That was my next question, actually. Do you think that America, the United States, do you think that changed your guys' music? Or
Oh, absolutely.
The craving? There's always a little difference in music.
Yeah.
Music rave at the time between Europe and the United States.
Sure.
So did you actually, for the United States, make music specifically marketed for?
No, we didn't do that. We made music for ourselves and to do what we thought was right. You know, that's the only purpose behind it, to get enjoyment. Because there's no good. You've got to have success with a record that you really believe in. The worst thing in the world is having. We worked with a lot of these bubblegum people in the '60s. You know, we were everybody's support group. We did a tour with like Norman Greenbaum, or you know, and those kind of people. And it's the worst thing in the world to have a hit with and be famous for something that you don't really like. You know, that's terrible. So we came here. Bill Graham brought us to America in 1967, and he just offered us 2 gigs. One was at the Fillmore East in New York. The other was at the Fillmore West in San Francisco. Only they were like 10 weeks apart. And we didn't know we were just English boys. We didn't know you had to fly, you know, to get to. So we just drove across the country and picked up free concerts, and we played all the clubs and the psychedelic clubs. It was brilliant. And and then we thought, well, hang on, we're developing a following. We kept coming back here. We supported the Cream. Do you remember the Cream?
Yeah, the Cream.
Okay, with Eric Clapton. We supported them on their farewell tour. And then we just kept coming back, and there wasn't much happening for us in England. We would have record success, but our success was growing over here, and we liked it here in the audience. We turned up at a concert one day, and Van Morrison, who was a big star in the '60s, he was on the bill. And I went to see the promoter, and I said, well, what time do we go on? And he said, well, you don't go on till about 10:30, you know. And I said, well, when does Van Morrison go on? He said, well, he goes on at like 9 o'clock. So I said, we're following him? He said, yeah. He said, they're a Moody Blues crowd. And that was the first time.
Van Morrison opening up for
Yeah. I don't think he liked it very much, but
oh well, that's the way
there you go.
it is. Hey, that brings me to a question of my own. I mean, I'm a big 60s music fan. And I mean, I love the Moody Blues, and I love Led Zeppelin, and all that other stuff. Did you ever play with Led Zeppelin?
yes, yeah, a couple of times on festivals and things like that. We used to do all those Isle of Wight. We did all of the Isle of Wight festivals. We did a lot of festivals through Europe. You know, yeah, many times we were with the same management. And in fact, the first time I ever played, I mean, there was a period, I suppose, from 1970 to 74 when we reached that sort of mega group status, and it's probably the unhappiest period of my life, although it was the most successful. But as a person, I think I was very unhappy then, and we were a very enclosed kind of world, you know. But the first time I ever met Jimmy Page was a long time before Led Zeppelin.
Okay.